We're just diving in.
Right.
We're back with another episode of the Workflow Roast. The last time Kelly and I had a chance to do this was at Workflow Con, which was super fun to have engagement and to have people popping into the chat and have
Yeah.
live issues come up. That was so fun. But now we're back again with our regular cadence. And so I'm excited to dive in with you, Kelly. How are you?
I'm good. And I've been looking forward to seeing you. It's been a couple of weeks.
I know.
Um, right? Trying to get it. Well, also I have had a couple of weeks. And so I was looking forward to seeing you and just doing this grand I love the workflow roast stuff.
Yeah.
And of course I love being with you. So that's awesome. Hi.
Same. I enjoy it too. I remember actually scaling new heights of last year. The first time I met the Financial Sense team, it was because you were standing there and you were like, "Hey, come over here. Come meet these people." And it was like one of those heartwarming, like, "Oh, I'm like people are introducing me to other people. Like that's so kind." And you always, think very fondly of those that are pulling you into circles that you probably have no part of being in.
Right. Oh, and I got to tell you, it was so funny at Connect, and it was nice seeing you at Connect, of course. Connect is one of those things where I feel like I see 1,000 people and I see no one.
Yes.
It's a whirlwind for sure. And I was doing this thing endlessly. If I introduced people to each other, they already, my default is to introduce people. But if
Yes.
I did, they already knew each other and they're like giving me the rolled eyes. If it was like some sort of thing where there wasn't an opportunity to introduce two people they hadn't met consistently 100% at Connect, that's what happened. So it was Kelly was
Yeah.
a bit of a connection loser at that one. It got to
Uh,
be funny.
it's so much easier to feel like you know somebody now, like with interacting on LinkedIn and different
Yeah.
groups. It's like, oh yeah, I know you. When in reality, you've never met in person, and so I love having those virtual relationships come to life.
Well, and one of the funny ones, and then we'll actually get on with the roast. One of the funniest is Ryan Lazanis of Future Firm,
Yeah.
who fellow Canadian, who I've known a heck of a long time, just because of the cloud accounting space up here in Canada was small, right?
Hmm.
So a super nice guy. Ryan and I, poor Ryan, honestly, every time I turned around, there was Ryan, or every time he turned around, there was me. I saw him probably 75 times over the course of the couple of days. It actually got to be ridiculous. So that was
Yep.
funny. But yeah, no, it was great.
Well,
Uh,
the Canadians kind of travel in packs, whether it's intentional or not. You just find all the Canadians are together somewhere drinking Labatt, and
is that what
that's
it is? Oh, okay.
interesting.
X, Molson Export. Okay, should we do some
Yeah.
workflow roasting here, or what should
Yes.
we do?
Let's do that. So we've got five different topics today: pricing, invoicing, client management, accounting background, and then importation. So we've got five topics. We will dive into those, and I will share my screen to provide a little bit of context. Let me pull this up here. All right. So here's the first submission. Talking to a potential client, he owns two car washes with storage units. Is there any way to ballpark how many hours a month it would take to do their books based off of this information? Wanting to give them a quote, but also worried about scaring them off. I've heard to charge $2 to $3 a transaction, so it'd be $1,400 to $2,100 a month. I plan to have a set monthly rate. Also, not wanting to come off that price if it is a fair price slash if it's going to take a significant amount of time. Kelly, how do you think about pricing engagements with minimal information, which I know you don't do, but how would
I
you think
don't.
about this?
No, I don't. I always look at the books. If you can get a paid diagnostic, great. But if you can't, then at least do a free one. And the transaction load is one of the reasons. One of my highest transaction load clients was actually a car wash with multiple locations, with multiple services at each location, and they did all kinds of crazy things. Super high transaction load, but a lot of it was POS transactions coming in. And the thing I had to do there's one of the rare things I automated from the bank feed, and it went into a clearing account, and that those POS clearing accounts were reconciled weekly to make, and that's where the validation of the file came in, that the bank
Mm-hmm.
feeds hadn't gone wild. But then I had a client that had quite a low transaction load, and it was one of the bigger engagements I ever had, because every transaction had some sort of weird touch to it, or a high
Yeah.
level consequence, or whatever the case may be. So she didn't say anything, or he didn't say anything about doing a file review, but man, do a file review. Quoting on transactions is dodgy business.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Is I think quoting based on a price per transaction is a losing game,
Mm,
because there are transactions that will have a much higher degree of complexity than others. Even though it's a low volume, it may take 90% of your time. And so when you
yeah.
look at it through that lens, I don't think it's an effective pricing method.
And I think again, there's no mention of doing a file review to see how complicated the file is, how far back transactions are messy, what's left, and not that anything is ever in undeposited funds or AR and AP. Never seen that.
Right.
Um, but if they aren't willing to let someone do a file review, then that would be a flag not to take the client on. And I don't say that lightly. I know people need the business and they want the business. So also, don't come off saying that you're going to come off, whether it's a fair price. Oh, I reread that. So it's not that they didn't want to come off as if they're overpriced. It's that they don't want to underprice it. Right.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So good on them not to underprice the file, but don't base it on transactions. I think we both agree on that, right?
Yeah. 100%. If I look at this objectively, to your point, two car washes would have a lot of POS transactions. I think there's some question mark for me of is this a coin operated,
Yeah.
a car wash, or is this one where somebody's going in, they're paying $10, they get a car wash? Like in either scenario, it's going to be a higher transaction volume and generally the same types of transactions. Same with the storage unit. I would look at that as just recurring revenue. You've got
Yep.
contracts in place, 12-month contracts, one fixed cost for those 12 months, like fairly simple transactions. If there are two different entities and wanting to roll that up, there's
Right.
some different complexities there. And so when I would think about pricing on this, I would go back to the value equation of like, what is the problem that this potential client is trying to solve? Are they just trying to solve it for compliance purposes, or do they actually want actionable information to help make decisions on improving profitability or things like that? And so I would probably get a little bit more specific around what is the actual need or problem that you're trying to solve, and then try to find a fair price relative to
I
those things.
Yeah, I have two final thoughts on it. Very often, car washes also have subscription pricing. So you may be managing outside applications here, both on the storage unit, but a lot of car washes now have subscriptions. Like you can buy a monthly, X, go get as many car washes as you want. And the other thing, and this is weird only because I had a car wash. Car washes tend to be, what do you call them? Empire builders. You don't
Yeah.
see many car washes that are just one. So the big reason that we did weekly, other than the transaction load, but also this particular car wash client of mine, and they were all separate entities. So whoever this, they need to take a look at whether they're actually two files. But also, they were in a constant state of funding, capital assets,
Mm,
property, all kinds of things. And every car wash that I've ever seen is constantly adding new locations. So be very, just like you said, what are the problems that they're trying to solve? We had early books closing on my client because they were always in a state of capital.
yep.
Yep.
You're spot on there. And I think when you think about car washes, there's often this multiple location model. And so it may be worth saying, okay, if your goal is to increase the number of car washes owned or built, what have you, maybe price it on a per car wash basis. Hey, it's $1,000 per car wash because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe storage units, it's based on number of units or something like that. But if you can break it down into terms that help them understand where your pricing is coming from rather than just value-based pricing, you're going to have a little
Yeah.
bit more success on potentially negotiating a bit higher of a rate for yourself.
And you said it, find their problem, solve for that.
Yep.
And then Jess made a really good point. Clearing accounts do have some complexity. There's some easy things that you can automate transactions coming into them, but there's a lot of complexity around clearing accounts, especially some of these POS systems like Square, for example. Actually,
Mm,
if they have a Square loan, they're deducting the amount of the loan payments every single day when they batch deposit and anyways, we could go on forever about the complexity
yeah.
of clearing accounts and POS systems. So be wary of that.
Yep. Totally,
Yep.
totally agree. Okay. Shall we jump to the next one?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's go to invoicing. Is there any way to make an invoice reoccurring but have it update the invoice to indicate for what month the services were provided? I have a janitorial company that bills on the 10th of the month prior to the month's work. He wants to automate about 200 monthly invoices, but if the invoice doesn't notate the month that services were for, clearly it's confusing his clients and it's delaying his payments.
Okay. So there needs to be better messaging overall to the clients about how they're. I don't know of a program that will put in this is for next month. I don't know if there's like a Zap for that or anything that will actually say, okay, it's November. This is for December's work. That
Mhm.
messaging is going to have to go out in whatever the contract or it's a subscription price statement, or they need to put it into, there's probably an agreement of some sort. It goes into the agreement. An invoice is going to come, and then give an example. An invoice is going to come out on the 10th of November. It is actually for December's work. So that could go right in, however the thing is delivered as well. But I don't know. Do you know of
Yeah.
any? I mean, we can't know every app,
Yeah.
but I don't know of one that would say the actual month.
Yeah, I'm not sure about like dynamic text input on invoices today. I'm sure there's a way that you could configure Zaps or some sort of automation to get that text in an invoice. But I think the easiest way is exactly what you said. Ensure that your clients understand through your pre-communications, pre-qualification process what it is. Also, like this is a subscription. This should likely be auto billed to your clients and
Yes.
auto collected. Um, the other thing is that when invoices are sent, I would likely recommend putting just a note, like on a QuickBooks invoice, you can add a note
Yep.
that's consistent with every single invoice that just says, hey, this invoice, reference your invoice date on the top of the invoice is for
Yep.
the next month's services. And so you don't have to have this dynamic text field, but rather you can just say, this is for next month's services. Thus, when they receive the invoice, they should have some clarity around that. But the fact that it's delaying payments is a little bit unusual to me,
Yep.
considering there's a payment due date on it. It's recurring, it's consistent. Like that's a little bit of a misnomer to me.
Yeah, so the only thing I'm wondering is, are they different prices? And if they are, why don't they just have a
Yeah.
copy in, right? So, but these payments should be automated,
How great of an advisory point would that be to this particular
right?
client for the accountant to go to their client and say, "Hey, have you considered a fixed pricing model based on the square footage of the buildings that you're cleaning? Hey, you're 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. Here's your fixed price. If you acquire more space, what have you, open a new office, here's the new price." Like that would create far more simplicity in the billing model.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of advisory to be done here. I have a fun point though. Connect. I like to session surf. I like to go see what my friends are doing. I like to
Yeah.
pop my heads in, like a lot of the session surfing going on. So I was going to session surf you and Kenji and the Canadian Bob Wang, and I got stuck because it was so fun. And then on the Canadian end, so one of my buddies, Brian Clare, you guys did a great job of making the audience the actual clients with problems to solve on an advisory level. And one of them was my buddy Brian Clare. Actually, Brian and I do quite a bit of work together. And he was the, what was he, a 500 million or a $50 million?
Brewery.
And then the other Canadian, you picked Canadians by accident. The other Canadian, Jordan, who's hilarious, he was a janitorial service. And
That's right.
that was absolutely hilarious. And then at the end, when Jordan said, "Does your brewery need a new janitorial service?" It was gold. Gosh, it was great. Okay,
It
janitorial. That's quite a segue, Kelly. Should we go on with the next
yeah.
question?
We can, yes. I mean, that conversation was so fun because it just leaned into just situations like this where it's like, how do you become an advisor? How do you sell that advisory
Yeah,
service? And how do you extract insights on simple things like this that your client may have just been doing for the last 10 years that
yeah,
you can then layer value on top of that to say, hey, have you thought about this slightly different presentation that would create so much more ease for you, for me, and for your
yeah.
clients? Like, those are really fun conversations to have.
Both accounts payable and accounts receivable are opportunities for advisory that are underlooked. Everybody's looking for all the high-headed stuff,
Yeah.
but really, you can start with AR and AP processes, AP especially.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Yep. And reminder, if you're tuning into this, feel free to drop any comments, questions into the chat, and we'll jump on those as well. So the next question revolves around the next statement revolves around W-9s. If a client pays his vendors mostly by paying via credit card or PayPal, do you make them get W-9s, or you just let it go since they do not need to be reported? I know they're supposed to get all W-9s, but let's face it, that's not how this works in real life. And when a client runs around with this credit card, can we just not worry about them if we were paid with a credit card? And therefore, 1099 reporting is on the credit card company. Canadians don't have to worry about this. Lucky for
No,
you.
you all are crazy. We watch this from north of the 49th, and we just are going, what goes on with the 1099 reporting? It's
It
crazy, man.
it is a little bit odd to me because you send out these 1099s or you receive 1099s and then you're not required to do anything with them. It's just like a back end IRS probably check figure on where 1099s issued relative to the gross income that was reported on a tax return. I don't actually know what happens on the back end. What I would say is if you're paying, so $600 per year is the limitation for
Yeah.
1099 issuances. And so if you're less than $600, I wouldn't even bother with it. I would say if you're above $600 and you have documentation of that, I would make every effort as intentional as possible to try to get them out to the right recipient. So sending out those emails in November, December saying, hey, we need to collect this information from you in order to issue a 1099. The credit card payments interesting. Like if a client is paying vendors by credit card, I'm not entirely sure how that process works. If the credit card company is actually required to send out the 1099s because they have all the 1099 or W-9 information on file. I believe the credit cards are maybe some absolving of the payor in order to issue the W-9, but I'm not an expert on that. PayPal, Venmo, I know that you would be required to issue a W or a 1099 to those contractors or vendors. So I would say err on the side of caution and issue as many as you feasibly can. Try to collect that information up front. If you can't, I'm not going to spend too much time sweating over it.
Right. Yep.
Cool. Easy. All right, let's jump into a meatier one, shall we? Whoops. Let's go here. All right, what would you do if you have no background in accounting and don't know anyone who does it, yet want to find out if it's something you want to do without breaking the bank? Have you seen online beginners classes that take you through the basics of what you do? I think bookkeeping might be something I would enjoy that I can have a flexible schedule with, but I don't want to spend thousands on classes just to find out that I don't like it.
I totally have an answer on this one because I took kinesiology at university. And then I ran a couple of marketing companies for a long time. So, but I was doing my own book, so I did get a hang for it. But what I did was I took there's a course. It's called the Accounting Coach. It's an online course. You can do the paid version, or there's a free starter version. I would start with the Accounting Coach, and then there's I think the other one is the Knowledge Bureau. Now, the Accounting Coach is interesting. Have you ever seen this program, Roman? Because you
No,
took accounting, right? So you didn't need to
I
take the
did.
account.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Accounting Coach is probably the OG of online courses. It has been around forever. And it is so old school, but seriously, he didn't need to change anything about it. Is literally a prof with like an easel here. And he walked, now I haven't looked at it, but I don't think there's been
Yeah.
any updates, but the information is solid. So I would do that. And the other thing I would do, and I would probably put myself through the QuickBooks Pro Advisor certification
Okay.
program, even just watch the videos, get yourself a Pro Advisor account and put fake data in there. You can actually create an entire profile. No roast is complete without talking about Chat GPT, but you can put it into one of the large language models. Like, I want to build a profile in QuickBooks Online to train myself on and give it an idea of what transactions you want. I'm making a super simple version of it. And
Yeah.
then play around in the sample file. There's sample files. Play
Hmm.
around to see if you actually like interface or zero. and see if you like interfacing with the product. So
Yeah. I was gonna say I like that. I pulled up the Accounting Coach website, by the way, just for reference. It looks like there's actually a lot of free resources there that you can absorb.
tons.
It's kind of gamified. It looks really engaging. I
Yeah,
didn't know that existed. That's a great resource. I like your second recommendation on looking at the Pro Advisor program. I know
yeah,
Jacqueline and the team at Intuit have put in a tremendous amount of work to improve and create engagement and just direct applicability to what you do as a bookkeeper and as an accountant. And they actually have a 30-hour bookkeeping course on the platform. And
yeah,
so that I think gives you two advantages in that you become a bit more of an expert in the platform, so it's more of a marketable skill to say I know this platform and I can put it to work at a company, but then also teaches you the foundations of accounting and bookkeeping. And so
yeah.
I think that is a really good path to follow, maybe in conjunction with what you're saying on like some chat GPT learning and some of the accounting coach resources, things like that.
So and on that note, you and I both are fans of FreshBooks, Zero, QuickBooks Online. Your partner Stacy is actually on the FreshBooks Accounting Council.
Hmm.
I've been on that council, whatever FreshPack. Lots of our friends have been on XPack, which is Zero. We've all been on some sort of accountant council with Intuit. Um, if to be perfectly honest, though, Intuit has the best training, and shouts to Intuit on all of the learnings that they put out there, and to Jacqueline who's taken over and really rising that next level. But that's also where the market is. Like if you want
Yeah.
to break in, right, you could do it as a FreshBooks expert or a Wave expert or a Zero expert, but I don't know what the percentage is, but if you want an easier way in, I did QBO, right?
I think so. And also, I hear that Intuit's hiring a bunch of accountants too. So there may be a role there after your training.
Right? I'm
um,
just saying start there. And if that's
yeah.
not the platform for you, you can look at some of the other platforms, but get the education where you can for free in a
Yeah.
software. So, because that's, you're going to spend your day in it. So you need to not decide just if you like the accounting side, software side of it.
That's right. That's right. The
Yeah.
other thing that I have a bit of a curiosity in that the first sentence says, I don't know anyone who does it. And it seems like something I want to do. How did you get in here? How did your question get to this forum to serve a bunch of accountants? Like there is
Yeah.
some connectivity to bookkeepers and accountants already via
Yeah.
just like posing this question. And so I would say the other thing is like start to get engaged, start to do a little bit of research, see maybe if there are any of your friends who are in accounting, if they're not, do they have friends that are in bookkeeping or accounting? Start to put those questions out there a little bit more communally to try to source some feedback on what does the day-to-day look like? How would this fit with the things that I'm really skilled at and enjoy relative to what the schedule's like? I think if you cast a little bit of a net out there, put yourself out there just enough to get some feedback, that could be a really helpful step as well.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a little further down the line, but in terms of getting experience, because eventually you're going to have to figure out what you do and don't like about it. I had a number of our own businesses that I was doing the bookkeeping for, anyways, at some point, because I was a job costing lunatic when we had the marketing companies, and my husband has always had a business and yada yada. And also put your personal finances on QuickBooks GL,
Hmm.
right? Like mess around with your own personal
Yeah.
finances. QBO GL is, that's where ours are now. I put them onto the GL program. So
Interesting.
General Ledger is
Yeah.
a great little product to get to know it in. But as you move along, one of the underlooked things is, and you're going to need to get the base knowledge first, is I actually worked for a temp agency doing accounting
Hmm.
work. And that really showed me what I liked to do and what I didn't like to do.
Yeah.
It gave me experience in safe environments, because generally these companies that you're going into have accounting departments. So you're just doing work in certain areas and there's supervision. It was a great way in. It was super interesting to go into all of these different companies. So don't undervalue experience in a temp agency.
Yep. I like that. That's good. All right. I think we got one more here in about 5 to 8 minutes left. Ooh, this is a little bit of a long one. All right, bear with me here.
Yeah.
I just into a completely new to me scenario and could use some help from somebody who understands this. A client is an importer of goods into the US. They had to make a payment for customs collateral bond entry, bond collateral to a marine bond company for an even amount of, let's say, $10,000. I asked the client to give me the paperwork and I'm not getting what I need. I need to understand better what I should be asking for. I've never worked with international customs bonds before. How does this work? Based on the partial paperwork that they did give me, they can get this amount back. But then what is the bond company getting out of it? Shouldn't there be a fee of some sort?
You're never going to believe why I know this. So, and maybe you have some clients that do this. Our marketing company, we had an import program from China.
Hmm.
So we did this day and night, and we lived and breathed trains, believe it or not, cargo ships, trains making it across the country, all of the things that you lose sleep over at night. But we did these bonds, and these are basically I would treat I would treat it like a prepaid. When it actually comes to fruition and the product comes in, there will be a fee. I think this is what the person doesn't realize. The fees are coming. They're just taking, it's like as if you took a deposit on a big job that you were doing. So, but it is for the government. So you need to be very careful about these because the government is going to want to make sure. Ultimately, this may go to some sort of um, import duty, import
Hmm.
tax. So you could do a prepaid on import tax. What would you do? What would you post it to? But there will be fees. They're coming.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It's spot on. I mean, I look at it as almost like a refundable insurance deposit of sorts. Of like, yes, you've got this prepaid asset that's on the books that will likely be refunded net of those fees, and so whatever that amount comes back to, that would offset then that prepaid amount. Then the remainder would then be floated over to the P&L in some sort of a fee or whatever
Yeah.
that type of designated expense looks like. This does get pretty complex in terms of how do you manage a fully burdened cost on your any goods that you're bringing in. And so I would always ensure that these types of fees and costs and everything goes into a cost of goods calculation, and so you understand what your margins are based on landed cost, because every dollar that you spend to get a product into a location that you're selling it would go against your margin there and in cost of goods sold. So I would just try to make sure that those aren't just stuffed in some sort of like operational fee category.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. This is going to go to COGS, but in the beginning, it's going to go to a balance sheet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's going to be journal entries. So you may as well, if this is something that this client of yours, well, they're an importer of goods. I'd
Yeah.
create a recurring transaction once you see that final invoice, so that
Yeah.
you make it easy for to do this in general. But create that balance sheet account, and then make sure, just like you said, it's got to go to cost of goods sold.
The other side of it too is like knowing that this like international customs and any type of government interaction, they're not going to be super helpful oftentimes in terms of sending paperwork and being timely with remittances of certain documents. And so sometimes that stuff does take a while. And so I would give the client a little bit of grace, but if it's just because they're ignoring you, that's a different problem altogether. And so if you're not getting what you need, keep after it. Set up those recurring reminders to pop a request over to the client. Don't put the burden on yourself to email them every 3 days. Like systematize that. Make sure that your client's aware, and then understand like what's the typical expectation for getting documentation on this from the customs agencies.
You are correct. It can be slow as molasses to get those in. Once this accountant or bookkeeper gets the hang of this, they may, once they get some of that documentation, which, like you said, is going to be slow to come, they may actually be able to do a rough calculation and then do
Yeah.
an adjustment afterwards if the client wants to keep up on what the cost of goods sold are. I'm a cost of goods sold lunatic. So,
Yep.
there are calculations on it,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they could get the hang of that eventually
Yep.
and get out
And
ahead of
and exactly, right? Then that goes into like demand planning and back into that advisory bucket of, hey, you know that you need to plan out your inventory purchases over the next 12 months. Let's go ahead and make an estimation based on the history of what percentage of bond customs collateral looks like. And so just anticipate that cash outflow ahead of those inventory purchases will help you better understand what cash requirements you need ahead of them, and or how
Oh,
to finance it if you're financing purchases.
well, that's where I was about to get to. So very often we were 3 months ahead on big deposits that went both to the supplier and to customs. And so they may be looking for financing. So exactly what you said, what I said, having a calculation that gives an approximate and let the financing company know about what that it is an approximation, but here's what you can anticipate. Yep.
Yep, like that. Good. We breezed through 5 different issues today, and we've got some good submissions. I would encourage anybody that's hanging on to the live stream here to so you can submit your questions on any of these channels. So Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, X. You can submit them in the Financial Sense user group on Facebook. You can direct message them to Kelly, myself, or anybody in the Financial Sense team, and we would love to have some dialogue about them. This is fun. I enjoy these conversations a lot.
Me too. I always look forward to seeing you, Roman. And we will get together again shortly on these.
I
And
believe we will be getting back after Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving.
yeah, you know what? I'm sad. I used to come down for American Thanksgiving for years, down to just outside of Massachusetts, which I can't even say, even though I was there a couple times a year for years. And so it was like incredible food, lots of football, giant family. It was great. I loved American Thanksgiving. I love Canadian Thanksgiving too. Ours is at a much nicer time of year. So the hiking is great. My one cousin calls it the enforced march, our Thanksgiving Day hike through the forest. But yeah, so happy Thanksgiving. That's next week. And
That's right.
yeah, so
We,
enjoy. I mean, you got little ones.
thank you.
Will they still be stuffing pie with their hands in their face,
Oh yeah.
or
Oh
will
yeah. At
they eat
least
it
one
with
of
a
them
fork?
will be. The 3-year-old will use a fork, but many families also take on enforced marches in the U.S. too, with turkey trots in the morning,
Turkey
and
trots, yeah.
they try to compensate for the massive quantities of calories that are consumed later in the day by turkey trotting in the morning. I will not be participating in that. I will just be participating in the calories. So I'm excited about
Oh, that's fun. Okay, great. Well, have a great
that.
Thanksgiving, and you and I will chat soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, everybody, for joining Workflow Roast today. And check in, subscribe on the channels to make sure you catch the next one. Thanks.